have no idea what this drink is, but it's really good. Good morning, good evening, and good night, everybody. My name is Sarah, and yes, we have a book to talk about today. Dread Nation by Justina Ireland. This is the type of book you think would be all over BookTube. It's YA, it has representation, it's action, it's like, obviously. Why, where is it though? No one's talking about this, which is fairly strange, because it's a pretty awesome book, all things considered. Dread Nation has everything you think would make it an absolutely amazing book. It's set in the Reconstruction period after the American Civil War, and it's zombies. Like, it's the Reconstruction period, but zombies started to show up. After Gettysburg, the dead started rising, and people kind of like put off fighting and started fighting the dead. Slavery is outlawed at this point, but you still get those like Jim Crow laws. You still get that we have to civilize the people feeling. Like, there's definitely some heavy racism in this book, and it's a huge part of the plot. Now, like I said, Reconstruction period, we have to civilize the people. How does that work in the context of this story, though? Because the whole taking Native Americans and bringing them into civilized schools, that was the original starting point of this story. That's what inspired the author to make this. So we have our main character, Jane, who is an African American, being sent off to a combat school to fight zombies. Now, I do want to talk about the language used in this. If you are uncomfortable with any sort of racism in the speech, especially back during the Civil War era, the N-word, that's a very big part of this. Even the name of the school that our main character is intending has some heavy words in the name. So just to be clear, if you are uncomfortable with that, this is not the book for you. Now, with this being set in the historical time period of the Reconstruction era, even with the zombies, it's surprisingly accurate. Like, I'm a bit of a history buff, but the Reconstruction period is not generally the era that I focus on. But even with my limited knowledge, I know it's like, this is actually like really how it was, like how it was originally there. It made me very happy when I was reading this book. That is fact, like, even if you don't know that much, you know, like, this is set in a real place. Now, our main character, Jane, she's a 16-year-old African-American girl. She was born to a white woman up on Rose Hill, and she's dealt with some heavy racism her entire life. That doesn't take away from her character. She's sassy and hot-headed and very quick-witted, and she's very good at lying. Now, a lot of people have a bit of a problem with her character. There are certain times where she is kind of unlikable, but looking at the situation that she's in, I kind of get why she is this way. Like, nobody would be that happy-go-lucky person that you would think would make a really good YA character. But no, she's 16-year-old and she's been fighting zombies since she was like 5. She's gonna have a bit of a wit to her. One of the biggest themes in this book is lying and deception, and Jane is very good at this. She lies her way out of every situation, out of danger, out of trouble. Lying is her way of surviving when she's not killing things. And this is even brought up when we talk about the racism in this book. One of the side characters, Kate, is a passing white, as in she's African American, but her skin is pale enough that people think that, oh, she just spent too much time in the sun. And this ends up being a fairly major plot point in the second half of the book, and it's this lying and deception that carries through all of the characters and their setting. This book isn't man versus nature like most zombie books are. This is man versus man, because the biggest threat in this book aren't the zombies. Jane actually has a moment where she lists all the times in her life where she was almost killed, and all of them was against a white person. It was never against a zombie. This book is what a YA should be. It has really heavy and serious topics like racism and religion and discrimination, and it handles them incredibly well. It's not gruesome. Like, if you have a really conservative parent who doesn't want their kid reading something heavy, you can read this book. It doesn't go into detail, but it doesn't treat the reader like they're an idiot. It has the topics, it has some subtext, but at the same time, it's just a fact. It's there. Ask the questions yourself. Don't have the text give you the answer. The morals in this story are not black and white at all. Everything is incredibly gray. And that's something I feel like needs to be handled better in most dystopian stories. Once you get into a situation where nature is trying to kill you, morals kind of go out the window. So all of this, it sounds really cool, right? It sounds great. The setting is cool, the characters sound great. What's the plot? Like, really? I was reading this book, and about page 200, I had a moment where I stopped and realized, what are they doing? What are they going for? I feel like the story is almost setting driven. It's very much characters reacting to the setting instead of reacting to the plot. The plot isn't driving the characters to do anything. This actually really affects the pacing too. The book is split up into two parts, the civilized East and the cruel West. The civilized East is our very beginning of the book, and it takes up the first 200 pages. But those 200 pages just keep going on and on and on, and it's very much just setting up the backstory to our characters. Their world, it's their world building moment. And I feel like that portion of the story could be cut in half, and we would get all the same information, all the same character arcs, and we wouldn't lose anything. Even though we're set in a combat school, we don't get these training montages, we don't get these battle scenes. We get one or two, but they're very short and very glossed over. If the civilized East was cut in half, we would still get everything exactly the same. We probably wouldn't lose anything except some really long and lengthy description. The second half of the book, The Cruel West, is actually in an entirely new setting, which is part of my biggest problem with this book, is the fact that we spend all this time in the first half of the book setting up this world and setting up this school, and then we leave. And it's gone, and it's mentioned, but we don't really know what's going on. It's very important that we have that first half of the book there to set up why they're going into the second half, but it could have been handled much better. Only about 3 of the characters carry over from the first half to the second and actually stay relevant. One of them, not very relevant for a decent chunk of the second half. We had so much time in this old place, and we get none of the carryover. I want to talk about the letters in this book, too. At the start of each chapter, we get a portion of the letter sent between the main character, Jane, and her mother, Beckett Rose Hill. In the first half, the civilized East, it's all Jane's letters. It's all her sending them back to her mother about her school, about her life there. And it's very much, this is the way it is, I miss you, please don't be sorry, but I'm here and I'm learning how to survive. The second half is actually her mother's perspective. And the reason why this is, now I'm going to go into a bit of a spoiler, so if you do not want any spoilers of this book at all, mute the video till I put down this mug. And the reason why that is because the letters have been kept from each other. Jane's letters are not reaching her mother, and her mother's letters are not reaching her. So we get this dynamic between Jane asking for her mother to reply, and then her mother asking Jane to reply, and they're both very worried that the other one's dead. You good? You good? Okay. That's a really good drink. Like I said, it's a really good book. It has so much potential. But my biggest problem is it's a setup for the rest of the series. Dread Nation is the first book in a series. I do not know how long that series will be, but it's very much, it just feels like a prequel. It feels like this should not be standing on its own. And because this only came out in April, we don't have the rest of this yet. I don't know how to judge the rest of the series with an incomplete story. The ending is very open-ended. It doesn't feel resolved at all, which is kind of annoying because it's like, hey, you want to know how this ends, you gotta pick up the next book, and I'm like, that's not how I read books. There's nothing inherently wrong with this. The pacing is a bit weird, but that's kind of natural for a first in a series. Like, it spends a lot of time world building because it has a lot of world it needs to build. But despite all that, there's nothing in this book that makes me go, yeah, this was a good book. This deserves all of my attention. So I kind of ended up skimming a lot of the ending. This book is great and all, but it did not hold my attention. Which is really a shame because, again, like I said, it has so much potential. It's a historical setting, African-American, zombies. She uses a sickle as a weapon. Overall, I give this book a 5 out of 10. It's just kind of there. It's good. It's fine. I see why people like it. I personally do not. It's one of those setting-driven books that just kind of happen. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any suggestions on what you want me to read next, leave them down in the comment section below. If you agree with my opinion, if you Don't explain why. Please, go ahead. I would love to have a conversation. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And as always, good night, good evening, and good morning, everybody.